Fleet Commander Thyral stood at the center of his command bridge with all four of his arms crossed behind his back. The Volanthi warship hummed with quiet power as it drifted through the darkness of space, and Thyral felt the familiar pride that came with commanding the finest vessel in the Concordat fleet. For 12,000 years, the Volanthi had ruled this region of the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and brought countless species under their control. Some had joined willingly, seeing the wisdom of Volanthi rule. Others had resisted, and those civilizations now existed only in history books and museum displays. The Volanthi way was simple and effective. Find new species before they became a threat. Scan their ships and their worlds. Learn everything about them in seconds. Then decide their fate based on what the scans revealed. Today was supposed to be another routine patrol through the outer territories. Thyral had done this same patrol perhaps 1,000 times before. Nothing ever happened out here in the empty space between stars. The region the primitives called Sol had never produced anything worth noting. But then the sensor officer made a sound that Thyral had never heard before. "Commander," the young officer said with a trembling voice, "we have detected a vessel emerging from the Sol region." Thyral turned slowly, his large oval eyes narrowing with curiosity rather than concern. A vessel from Sol was interesting, but hardly alarming. The Concordat had monitored that small yellow star for generations. The species living there had seemed primitive beyond measure, still fighting among themselves on their single world. "Show me," Thyral commanded. The main display flickered to life, and Thyral saw the strange ship for the first time. It was small, perhaps 1/10 the size of his own vessel. The design was crude and blocky, with none of the elegant curves that marked Volanthi engineering. It looked like something a child might build from spare parts. "How amusing," Thyral said with a slight laugh. "They have finally managed to leave their little world. I suppose we should welcome them to the greater galaxy." The crew around him chuckled at his joke. Everyone knew what welcome meant in Volanthi terms. It meant a deep scan followed by a decision. Join the Concordat willingly, or face the consequences of refusal. "Begin the standard scan," Thyral ordered. "I want to know everything about this primitive vessel. Every weapon, every system, every life form aboard. Let us see what these creatures have managed to create." The sensor officer nodded and turned to his console. His four thin fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease. The Volanthi scanning technology was the finest in the known galaxy, capable of analyzing every molecule of a target vessel from 10,000 kilometers away. "Scan initiated, Commander," the officer reported. "Full analysis will be complete in approximately 30 seconds. Thyral clasped his arms behind his back again and waited. He imagined the report would be entertaining. Primitive chemical engines, perhaps. Simple projectile weapons. A crew of frightened creatures who had never seen the stars before. The Concordat would offer them a choice, as they always did. Surrender peacefully and become a client species, serving the greater good of Volanthi civilization. Or refuse and face the overwhelming might of the Concordat fleet. Most species chose to surrender once they saw the size and power of a Volanthi warship. The few who refused became examples for others. Their worlds were burned, their ships were destroyed, and their names were forgotten. "Commander," the sensor officer said suddenly, his voice sounding strange. Thyral looked at the young officer and noticed something unusual. The officer's four eyes had grown very wide, and his skin had turned pale. His hands were no longer moving across the console, but instead gripping the edge of the panel as if he might fall. "What is it?" Thyral asked, feeling the first small hint of unease. "The scan results are coming in," the officer said, "but there must be some kind of error. The readings cannot be correct." Thyral felt his irritation growing. Volanthi sensors did not make errors. They were the finest instruments in the galaxy, calibrated to perfection by the greatest scientist their civilization had ever produced. "Explain yourself," Thyrol demanded. The sensor officer turned to face his commander, and Thyrol was shocked to see something he had never witnessed before in a Volanthi officer. He saw fear, raw, undisguised terror in those four wide eyes. "The weapons systems on that vessel," the officer began, his voice barely above a whisper. "They are not primitive, Commander. They are not primitive at all." Thyrol stepped closer to the sensor console, pushing the frightened officer aside. He would see these readings for himself and determine what had caused such an unprofessional display of emotion. The data scrolled across the screen, and Thyrol felt his own confidence begin to crack. "This cannot be," he muttered. But the sensors did not lie. The sensors never lied. And what they were telling him now would change everything the Volanthi believed about their place in the galaxy. The small, crude, ugly vessel before them was not the product of a primitive civilization just learning to reach for the stars. It was something else entirely. It was something terrifying. "Commander," the sensor officer said from behind him, "what do we do?" Thyrol did not answer immediately. He could not answer. His mind was still trying to process what the sensors had revealed. Every assumption he had made about this encounter was wrong. Every prediction had been turned upside down. The vessel from Sol was small, yes. It was crude and blocky and ugly, yes. But it was also the most heavily armed ship that Thyrol had ever seen in his 200 years of service. "Get me a full analysis," Thyrol finally commanded, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I want to know everything. Every weapon, every system, every detail. And send a priority message to High Command. Tell them we have made first contact with the species from Sol." He paused and looked at the strange vessel on the display, this ugly little ship that had just shattered his understanding of the universe. "Tell them we may have a problem," he added quietly. "Tell them we may have a very serious problem indeed." The bridge fell silent as the crew worked at their stations. No one spoke. No one joked. The easy confidence of moments ago had vanished completely. Something had changed in those 30 seconds of scanning. Something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power that the Volanthi had maintained for 12,000 years. And Thyrol knew, with a cold certainty that settled into his bones, that the galaxy would never be the same again. Senior Analyst Corvin worked through the night cycle, his team of scientists gathered around him as they intercepted and decoded the transmissions coming from the human vessel. The work was surprisingly easy, and that fact alone was troubling. "They are not even encrypting their communications," one of the junior analysts observed. "Anyone with basic receiving equipment could listen to everything they say." Corvin nodded slowly. Either they are confident that no one is listening, or they simply do not care who hears them. I am not certain which possibility is more concerning. The transmissions contain vast amounts of data, including historical records, cultural documents, and entertainment broadcasts. The humans apparently stored their entire civilization's knowledge in digital form and carried it with them wherever they went. "Begin with their history," Corvin ordered. "I want to understand how this species developed." The team worked quickly, translating the human language and compiling the information into a coherent timeline. What emerged from this research would haunt Corvin for the rest of his life. The humans had evolved on their death world approximately 300,000 years ago. From the very beginning, they had been forced to compete for survival against predators, harsh weather, and limited resources. They had learned to make tools and weapons, and they had used these inventions to fight their way to the top of their planet's food chain. But their struggles did not end there. Once they had conquered the other species on their world, they began to fight among themselves. War, it seemed, was woven into the very fabric of human existence. Corvin studied the records of human conflict with growing horror. They had fought wars over territory, over resources, over religious beliefs, over political ideas. They had developed increasingly deadly weapons with each generation, as if the purpose of their intelligence was to create new ways of killing each other. "Look at this," one of the analysts said, highlighting a particular period in human history. They call it the Second World War. It occurred less than 100 years ago by their calendar. The data showed a conflict that had engulfed nearly their entire planet. Dozens of nations had fought against each other in battles of unimaginable scale. Hundreds of millions of humans had died in just 6 years of fighting. How did it end? Corvin asked. The analyst hesitated before answering. They developed a weapon capable of destroying an entire city with a single bomb. They called it the atomic bomb. And when they created this weapon, they used it immediately. They dropped 2 of these bombs on civilian population centers, killing hundreds of thousands of people in seconds. Corvin felt his stomach turn. They used a weapon of mass destruction against their own species? Against cities filled with non-combatants? Yes. Analyst, and here is the truly remarkable part. After the war ended, they did not destroy these weapons or ban their creation. Instead, they built more of them. Many more. Within a few decades, they had constructed enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire planet several times over. Why would they do such a thing? Corvin demanded. They believed that the threat of total destruction would prevent war. The analyst explained. They called this concept mutually assured destruction. If everyone could destroy everyone else, then no one would dare start a conflict. Corvin sat back in his chair, struggling to process this information. The humans had created weapons capable of ending their own civilization, and they had done this intentionally. They had pointed these weapons at each other for decades, knowing that any mistake could result in the extinction of their species. And somehow, they had survived. They had lived with this threat hanging over them and continued to advance their technology and expand their population. They had walked along the edge of annihilation as if it were a normal way to live. Continue the analysis. Corvin ordered. I want to know more. The team worked for several more hours, uncovering layer after layer of human history. Each new discovery was more disturbing than the last. The humans had fought in trenches for years, enduring conditions that would break any Volanti soldier within days. They had continued fighting even when disease, starvation, and exposure killed more of them than enemy weapons. They had marched into certain death again and again, driven by loyalty, fear, hatred, or simple stubbornness. They had conquered their own planet's oceans and skies. They had sent explorers to their moon using rockets that were barely more advanced than controlled explosions. When those explorers died, they had sent more. When those died too, they had sent more still. Failure never stopped them. Death never discouraged them. Look at their entertainment, another analyst suggested. It may tell us something about their psychology. Corvin agreed, and the team began to examine human stories, games, and artistic works. What they found was illuminating. The humans told stories about war and violence constantly. Their heroes were warriors and soldiers and fighters. Their games simulated combat and conflict. Even their children played with toy weapons and pretended to kill each other. But there was another pattern in their stories that Corvin found even more significant. The humans loved tales about facing impossible odds and refusing to surrender. Their greatest heroes were those who fought against overwhelming enemies and won through determination, cleverness, or sheer refusal to accept defeat. They celebrate struggle, Corvin realized. They do not wish for easy victories or peaceful lives. They want challenges to overcome. They want enemies to defeat. Conflict is not just something they accept. It is something they need. The senior analyst gathered all of the research and prepared a report for Commander Thyral. As he compiled the information, one detail kept returning to his mind. The vessel that had emerged from human space was classified in their records as an exploration ship, not a warship, not a military vessel. An exploration ship designed to investigate unknown regions of space and make peaceful contact with alien civilizations. If this was what humans built for peaceful exploration, what did they build for war? Corvin did not want to imagine the answer. He finished his report and made his way to the command bridge, where he knew Commander Thyral was waiting. The commander needed to understand what they were facing. The Volanthi Concordat had conquered the galaxy by being the strongest, the most advanced, the most willing to use force. But now they had found a species that might be stronger. A species that had been fighting since the first day of their existence. A species that had nearly destroyed itself with nuclear fire and had simply shrugged and built more weapons. The humans were coming, and the galaxy was not ready for them. Corvin entered the bridge and saw Commander Thyral standing at the main viewport. The old analyst took a deep breath and prepared to deliver the most important report of his career. "Commander," he said, "I have completed my analysis. You will not like what I have found." Thyral turned to face him, and Corvin saw that the commander already knew. The fear in his eyes said everything. "Tell me anyway," Thyral ordered. "Tell me everything." The data continued to pour across the sensor console, and with each new piece of information, Commander Thyral felt his unease grow deeper. The readings were impossible, and yet the sensors insisted they were true. Senior Analyst Corvin pushed through the crowd of officers that had gathered around the console. Corvin was the oldest and most experienced scientist aboard the vessel, a veteran of hundreds of first contact situations. If anyone could make sense of these readings, it would be him. "Let me see," Corvin demanded, his voice carrying the authority of age and expertise. Thyral stepped aside and allowed the old analyst to examine the data. He watched Corvin's face carefully, hoping to see confusion or even amusement. Perhaps the old scientist would laugh and explain that the sensors had malfunctioned. Perhaps there was a simple explanation for all of this. But Corvin did not laugh. His expression grew more serious with each passing second, and his skin turned the same pale color that had marked the sensor officer's fear. "By the ancient stars," Corvin whispered. "How is this possible?" "Explain it to me," Thyral commanded. "Tell me what we are looking at." Corvin took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice shaking slightly. "The vessel before us measures approximately 300 meters in length. It is roughly 1/10 the size of our own warship. By all normal standards, it should be a minor threat at most." "But," Thyral prompted, "but the weapon systems aboard that ship are beyond anything I have ever encountered," Corvin continued. "They have kinetic accelerators mounted along the entire length of the hull. These weapons appear capable of launching solid projectiles at speeds approaching 4% of the speed of light." Thyral felt a chill run through his body. 4% of light speed. A projectile moving at that velocity would punch through Volanthi shields like they were made of paper. No armor in the Concordat fleet could withstand such an impact. "There must be some mistake," the tactical officer said from across the bridge. "No civilization uses kinetic weapons anymore. Energy weapons are far more efficient and precise." "The humans apparently disagree," Corvin replied grimly. "And that is not all. The sensors have detected over 300 nuclear warheads stored in the forward section of the vessel. Each warhead carries enough destructive power to destroy a small moon." 300? Thyral repeated in disbelief. "On a single ship that size? Where do they store them all?" Corvin shook his head slowly. "They've packed them into every available space, Commander. The storage methods are crude and dangerous by our standards. The warheads are stacked in compartments with minimal shielding. Any significant damage to the hull could trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the vessel. Then they are fools, the tactical officer said with forced confidence. They carry weapons that could kill them as easily as their enemies. Perhaps, Corvin admitted, but consider what this tells us about their mentality. They are willing to fly through space, sitting on top of enough explosive power to crack a planet. They accept this risk as normal. What does that say about the species we are dealing with? No one had an answer for that question. Corvin continued his analysis, and each new detail was worse than the last. The human vessel used chemical propellants that were so unstable they would be banned on any Volanthi ship. The armor plating was made of crude but incredibly dense materials, including something the computer identified as depleted uranium and tungsten carbide. The outer hull was covered in panels that the sensors identified as reactive explosive armor, designed to literally explode outward when struck by enemy fire. They use explosions to defend against explosions? The sensor officer asked with obvious confusion. It appears so, Corvin confirmed. The armor is designed to detonate when hit, redirecting the force of incoming weapons away from the main hull. It is primitive and wasteful and incredibly dangerous, and yet the calculations suggest it would be highly effective against our standard weapon systems. Tyrell gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles turning white. What about the crew? What can you tell me about the beings who fly this ship? Corvin manipulated the controls, and a new set of data appeared on the screen. The biological readings from the human vessel. And somehow, these readings were even more disturbing than the weapons analysis. The crew consists of approximately 200 individual life forms, Corvin reported. They are carbon-based, oxygen-breathing bipeds. Their average height is between 1.5 and 2 meters. Nothing remarkable so far. Continue, Tyrell ordered. Their cardiovascular systems are highly redundant, Corvin said. They have a single primary heart, but their bodies can continue functioning for short periods even with severe damage to this organ. Their blood contains a remarkable clotting agent that can seal wounds with incredible speed. They are built to survive injury, Tyrell observed. Indeed, Commander. But there is more. Their skeletal structure is made of dense calcium compounds that can withstand tremendous force. Our calculations suggest they could survive impacts and pressures that would instantly kill a Volanthi. And their muscular system is extraordinarily powerful for their size, capable of sustained exertion that would exhaust any species we have encountered. The tactical officer moved closer to the display. Are they soldiers? Some kind of engineered warrior caste? Corvin shook his head slowly. No. That is perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. According to the data, these appear to be ordinary members of their species, not specially bred soldiers or genetically enhanced warriors. Just normal humans, if these readings are to be believed. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. The creatures aboard that small, ugly ship were not elite troops selected for space combat. They were simply average members of a species that happened to be built for violence and survival. What kind of world produces beings like this? Someone whispered. Corvin pulled up additional data, cross-referencing the biological readings with environmental analysis. Their homeworld has high gravity, extreme temperature variations, and an atmosphere rich in oxygen but containing numerous toxins. The planet experiences regular geological instability, violent weather patterns, and intense radiation from their star. By Volanthi standards, it would be classified as a death world. And they evolved there? Tyrell asked. They survived those conditions naturally? Not just survived, Commander. They thrived. They became the dominant species on their planet despite these challenges. Every aspect of their biology has been shaped by constant struggle against a hostile environment. Thyrol looked at the crude vessel on the main display with new eyes. He no longer saw a primitive ship built by backward creatures. He saw a weapon designed by beings who had been fighting for survival since the first moment of their existence. "Corvin," he said quietly, "I need to know everything about these humans. Their history, their culture, their psychology. I need to understand what we are dealing with." "I will begin analysis immediately, Commander." Thyrol nodded and turned away from the console. He walked to the main viewport and stared at the human ship floating in the darkness. Such a small vessel. Such a dangerous mystery. For the first time in his long career, Commander Thyrol of the Volanti Concordat did not know what to do next. Commander Thyrol listened to Corvin's report in complete silence. The senior analyst spoke for nearly an hour, detailing everything the research team had discovered about humanity. The wars, the weapons, the incredible determination to survive and dominate. When Corvin finished, Thyrol remained quiet for a long moment. "You are telling me," the commander finally said, "that this species has been fighting itself for its entire existence. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their world. They have used these weapons against each other. And yet, they are still here, reaching out into the galaxy." "That is correct, Commander." Thyrol turned to his tactical officer. "Run the projections. If we engage that vessel, what are our chances of victory?" The tactical officer worked at his console for several minutes, inputting data and running calculations. When he looked up, his expression was grim. "Our chances of victory are approximately 34%, Commander. But even if we win, our casualties would be severe. I estimate we would lose at least 60% of our crew and suffer critical damage to all major systems. 60% casualties to defeat a single exploration vessel," Thyrol repeated. "And if they send warships?" The tactical officer did not answer. He did not need to. Everyone on the bridge understood the implications. Before anyone could speak again, the communications console began to flash. An incoming transmission from the human vessel. "They are hailing us, Commander," the communications officer reported. "Standard first contact frequencies. They are attempting communication." Thyrol straightened his uniform and composed his features. Whatever happened next, he would face it with the dignity befitting a Volanti commander. "Put them on the main display," he ordered. The screen flickered, and then a human face appeared. It was a female, according to the briefing Corvin had provided. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and brown eyes that seemed to study the Volanti bridge with keen intelligence. She wore a uniform of dark blue with colored badges on her chest. And she was smiling. Thyrol felt a chill run through him. The briefing had explained that humans showed their teeth as a gesture of friendliness. But all Thyrol could see was a predator displaying its weapons. Sharp white teeth designed for tearing flesh, presented openly as if in challenge. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Nations ship Perseverance," the human said. Her voice was clear and confident, carrying easily across the communication channel. "We represent the United Nations of Earth, and we come in peace. We are honored to make first contact with your civilization." The words were friendly enough, but Thyrol could not shake his unease. Behind the captain, through a transparent viewport, he could see other humans moving about their duties. One of them appeared to be exercising, lifting heavy weights and straining against resistance. "Why is that one punishing himself?" Thyrol asked before he could stop himself. Captain Vasquez glanced over her shoulder and laughed. The sound was strange and unsettling. "Oh, that is just Lieutenant Chun. He is working out, keeping his body in shape for duty. He's voluntarily subjecting himself to physical strain?" Thyrol asked in disbelief. "For what purpose?" "Humans require regular exercise to maintain our health and strength," Captain Vasquez explained. "If we do not challenge our bodies, they become weak. The struggle keeps us strong. Tyrell exchanged a glance with Corvin. The struggle keeps them strong. Of course it did. Everything in human existence was about struggle and survival. I am Commander Tyrell of the Volanti Concordat, he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. Your vessel has entered Concordat space. You must identify your intentions. Our intentions are peaceful, Commander, Captain Vasquez replied. We have recently developed faster-than-light travel, and we are exploring the galaxy. We hope to meet other intelligent species and establish friendly relations. Trade, cultural exchange, mutual cooperation. We believe the universe is large enough for all of us to thrive together. Her words sounded sincere. Her smile seemed genuine. But Tyrell could not forget the 300 nuclear warheads packed into her ship, or the kinetic accelerators capable of punching through his shields. You speak of peace, Tyrell said carefully, yet your vessel is heavily armed. Why would an exploration ship carry such devastating weapons? Captain Vasquez's smile faded slightly. The universe can be dangerous, Commander. We have learned through hard experience that it is better to have weapons and not need them than to need them and not have them. We hope never to use these weapons against another intelligent species. But we will not allow ourselves to be helpless victims either. There was no threat in her voice. She was simply stating a fact. The humans would prefer peace, but they were prepared for war. They had always been prepared for war. Your species has a violent history, Tyrell observed. Our analysis of your transmissions has revealed centuries of conflict and destruction. Why should we believe you want peace now? Captain Vasquez nodded slowly, as if she had expected this question. You're right, Commander. Humanity has a bloody past. We have fought each other over foolish things, and we have caused great suffering. But we have also learned from our mistakes. We have realized that cooperation brings more prosperity than conflict. We have united our world and turned our energy toward exploration and discovery. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft but firm. We are not perfect, Commander. We still struggle with our violent nature, but we are trying to be better. We want to build friendships among the stars, not empires. Will you give us a chance to prove ourselves? Tyrell did not know how to respond. The Volanti had built their civilization on conquest and dominance. They had never considered the possibility of equals, only subjects and enemies. But these humans were not like any species the Concordat had encountered before. They were strong enough to fight, wise enough to seek peace, and determined enough to pursue their goals whatever obstacles they faced. I must consult with my government, Tyrell finally said. First contact protocols require careful consideration. I cannot make promises on behalf of the entire Concordat. Captain Vasquez's smile returned, warm and genuine. Of course, Commander. We understand the need for caution. Take all the time you need. The Perseverance will remain at this position until we receive your response. We look forward to meeting your people properly. The transmission ended, and the main display returned to showing the small human vessel floating peacefully in space. Peaceful, yet bristling with weapons. Friendly, yet capable of terrible destruction. What do we do now, Commander? The tactical officer asked. Tyrell stared at the human ship for a long moment. 300 nuclear warheads. Kinetic accelerators. A crew of survivors from a death world who exercise voluntarily to stay strong. We do exactly what I told them, Tyrell said. We consult with High Command. And we pray to the ancient stars that the humans truly want peace. And if they do not? Tyrell turned away from the viewport, his expression grave. Then we pray that we can give them whatever they want. Because I do not believe we can stop them from taking it. The message from Commander Tyrell reached Volanti High Command within hours. Transmitted at maximum priority, across the vast communication network of the Concordat. The Supreme Council gathered in emergency session, 12 of the most powerful individuals in the known galaxy, and they reviewed the data with growing alarm. First Counselor Marvex read the report 3 times before she spoke. This cannot be accurate. No species develops this way. No civilization survives such constant warfare. And yet the evidence is clear. First Counselor, responded Admiral Vorthen, the highest-ranking military commander in the Concordat. The humans are exactly what Commander Therill described. They are survivors of a death world, shaped by endless conflict, armed with weapons that rival our own. Perhaps weapons that exceed our own. The council chamber fell silent. For 12,000 years, the Volanthi had believed themselves supreme. They had conquered every species they encountered, absorbed or destroyed every potential rival. The galaxy belonged to them. But now, emerging from an insignificant corner of space, came a species that might challenge everything. What are our options? First Counselor Marvex demanded. Admiral Vorthen activated a holographic display showing the strategic situation. We could attempt to destroy them now, while they are few. A massive fleet assault on their home system might eliminate the threat before it grows. And the cost of such an assault? The Admiral hesitated. Based on the capabilities demonstrated by their exploration vessel, I estimate we would lose between 40 and 60% of any fleet we send. Perhaps more if they have defensive installations in their home system. And there is no guarantee of success. Unacceptable, Marvex declared. What else? We could attempt containment, another counselor suggested. Establish a blockade around their space. Prevent them from expanding further into the galaxy. Admiral Vorthen shook his head. That would require a permanent fleet presence of enormous size. And if the humans decided to break through our blockade, we would face the very war we are trying to avoid. Only on ground of their choosing, not ours. Ben, what do you suggest, Admiral? Vorthen took a deep breath before answering. I suggest we accept their offer of peaceful relations. We establish diplomatic contact, trade agreements, cultural exchange. We become their friends, or at least avoid becoming their enemies. The council erupted in protests. Accept equality with another species? Negotiate rather than dictate? This was not the Volanthi way. But First Counselor Marvex raised her hand for silence, and the chamber grew quiet. Admiral Vorthen speaks wisdom, even if we do not wish to hear it. Look at the data before us. Look at what these humans have survived. Look at what they are capable of. She stood and walked to the holographic display, studying the image of the human vessel. For 12,000 years, we have ruled this galaxy because we were the strongest. We conquered because no one could stop us. But strength is not permanent. Power shifts. And now we must consider a future where we are no longer supreme. What are you saying, First Counselor? One of the younger council members demanded. I am saying that we have 2 choices. We can fight the humans and possibly win, but at a cost that would cripple our civilization for generations. Or we can welcome them as partners and try to shape their growth in ways that benefit us. Marvex turned to face the council directly. The humans claim they want peace. They say they have learned from their violent past and wish to cooperate with other species. Perhaps this is true, perhaps it is not. But I would rather test their sincerity through diplomacy than through war. The debate continued for many hours, but in the end, the council reached a decision. They would accept the human offer of peaceful contact. They would send diplomats to meet with the newcomers and establish the foundations of a relationship between civilizations. But they would also prepare for the worst. Shipyards across the Concordat would increase production. Military research would focus on countering the human weapons. Every contingency would be planned for, every scenario considered. The message sent to Commander Therill was simple. Welcome the humans. Learn everything possible about them and report any signs of hostile intent immediately. 3 days later, Captain Elena Vasquez stepped aboard the Volanthi command ship as an official diplomatic guest. She came with a small honor guard, 6 human soldiers in formal uniforms. To Volanthi eyes, they looked terrifying. Tall, muscular beings with predator eyes and confident movements. Each one looked capable of killing with bare hands. But they smiled and offered handshakes, a human greeting that Therill had learned about from the cultural database. They spoke politely and showed genuine curiosity about Volanthi customs. They complimented the ship, asked questions about Volanthi history, and seemed delighted by everything they saw. Captain Vasquez presented gifts from Earth, bottles of fermented liquid called wine, pieces of art created by human hands, and small electronic devices containing samples of human music and literature. She spoke of her hopes for friendship between their species and her belief that together they could achieve great things. Tyrell watched her carefully throughout the visit, searching for any sign of deception. But all he saw was a sincere woman who genuinely wanted peace. A woman who came from a species of warriors, but chose to extend her hand in friendship. Perhaps, he thought, the humans really had learned from their violent past. Perhaps they truly wanted to be better. Perhaps the galaxy could accommodate both the Volanthi and humanity, growing together rather than destroying each other. Or perhaps the humans were simply patient. Perhaps they were willing to smile and shake hands today while they built their fleets and expanded their reach. Perhaps in 100 years or 1,000 years, they would be strong enough to take whatever they wanted. Tyrell did not know which future awaited them. No one could know. But as he watched Captain Vasquez laugh at a joke told by one of his officers, he found himself hoping for the best. The humans were dangerous, yes. They were built for war, shaped by conflict, armed with terrible weapons. But they were also trying to be something more. They were reaching out with open hands instead of closed fists. The Volanthi had spent 12,000 years building an empire through force. The humans had spent 12,000 years fighting to survive. Now their paths had crossed, and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. Whatever came next, Therill knew one thing for certain. The old order was finished. The days of easy Volanthi dominance were over. A new era had begun, and humanity would help shape it. He only hoped they would choose to build rather than destroy. Because if the humans ever decided to make war on the galaxy, Tyrell was not sure anyone could stop them. The universe had changed forever on the day the Volanthi scanned a human warship. And the Concordat would never forget the lesson they had learned. Some species were better left as friends than faced as enemies. And humanity was the most important example of all.